Hi, I'm Tim and welcome to Watch You Want. Thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at a modern update of a Jaeger-LeCoultre classic, arguably the brand's icon. This is the Reverso Grande Date 46.5 millimeters lug to lug by 29 millimeters wide in 18 karat yellow gold. The first and foremost thing you need to know about the Reverso is just as Rolex has the Submariner, just as Breitling has the Navitimer, just as Patek Philippe has the Calatrava and Audemars Piguet has the Royal Oak, the Reverso is the icon of the Jaeger-LeCoultre manufacturer. It is the face of the brand. But they come in so many varieties that there really is no definitive Reverso. In fact, I would argue that the icon for any given JLC enthusiast is the Reverso model that speaks to him individually. So what the Grande Date brings to the table is that it was part of the first generation of the Extra Grand Taille, the XGT case size. It inherited that case from the 2002 Septantieme, the 70th anniversary Reverso, which I should mention came out a year late. It should have been a 2001, strictly speaking. But that larger case size was the very first time we saw a Reverso that was bigger than 42 millimeters lug to lug. It was sort of a coming of age for this classic Art Deco model in the 21st century. The wrist shot is important. Now, each Reverso is going to wear a little bit bigger than its nominal size. Because the lugs are drilled relatively high, the spring pins actually enter the lugs somewhat higher from the skin and draw the strap up a little higher than is conventional on a round watch. But the nice thing about the Reverso is, although it does wear a little bit bigger, its rectilinear geometries pair beautifully from an aesthetic standpoint with the wrist. You can see those linear gadroons running parallel to the direction of my 6 1/3 inch 16 centimeter wrist. They really have a side-to-side flow that's quite fluid, but at the same time, that case, classically, almost like a Greek temple in its geometry, straight up and down, perpendicular to the flow of the wrist. It's a striking contrast, so it's both contrasting and complementary at the same time from an aesthetic standpoint. Now, ergonomically, the Reverso's redeeming trait is that the back is completely flat. So it will sit on anything from a semi-round to a completely flat wrist. If you've got an oval profile like me, good to go. If your wrist is completely round like a baseball bat, I could see you having problems, but at the same time, if your wrist is that big and thick, the XGT case is probably your option if you want to go with a Reverso. So consider it. At Watch You Want, we have a 7-day no questions asked return policy, so if you wanted to do your own on-the-wrist impression, you're more than welcome to. Now, this Reverso Grande Date is 46.5 millimeters lug to lug. So the measurement that you're seeing on our website speaks to the entire span of the case. And that's important to note because most round watches are rated according to the size, the diameter of the round portion. So the minimum distance between 2 points at the outer portion of the case is normally how you get the diameter of something, for instance, like a Rolex Yachtmaster 2, which is quoted as a 44, but is actually 53 millimeters lug to lug. So in terms of fit, this Reverso is quoted as a 46.5, but it doesn't wear like something bigger than a Yachtmaster 2 or bigger than a Royal Oak Offshore 44. You know, it's not something that's comparable in size on the wrist to a 47 millimeter Panerai or a 48 millimeter Hublot King Power. It wears, I would say, more or less like a 44, 45 millimeter round watch. And that's a good approximation. That's your size comparable for those who haven't had one of these on your wrist. The nice thing about it is it does sit flat. As stated, the case back of the watch is completely board-like. So it's not going to want to tilt at an awkward angle. And I'm really going in depth on fit because fit is the most important thing when buying a Reverso. I think almost anyone can fall in love with the looks of it and the watchmaking qualities of it. And naturally, the watchmaking qualities of it are the star of the show. I'm going to head back to the dial in just a second, but I'm going to start my tour of the watchmaking aspects with the movement itself. Having exhausted everything I had to say about fit, let's talk a little bit about finish. This is the Jaeger-LeCoultre movement caliber 875. This is a direct descendant of the awesome twin-barrel 8-day movement developed for that 70th anniversary Reverso. Years in the making, also highly stylized. It's not just a movement with phenomenal and really quite impressive technical specs. It's also a beautiful movement that was designed in the interests of classical simplicity, geometric fit to the size and the shape of the case, and also an aesthetically pleasing, enduring look that would encourage people to spend about as much time on each side of this Reverso, despite the fact that this one is purely artistic, and this one is a combination of art and information. But the case back reveals a lot of key features of this watch. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about shaped movements and sized movements. It's considered emblematic of high horology manufacturers to build movements that are shaped appropriately for the cases in which they're placed. We've seen an epidemic of undersized movements in recent years, that is, movements placed in cases that vastly dwarf them, and we've seen small round movements placed in rectangular watches. We've seen rectangular movements placed in round watches. We've seen casebacks that play all kinds of visual tricks, adding spacers and buffers and all manner of frippery to try to disguise the fact that many watchmakers simply don't do what JLC does because they can't. They can't design a movement that's specific to the case. JLC can, and that's probably the first major highlight here. Now, the other important thing to mention is that this is an 8-day movement. Twin barrels, coupled in series, both of them are located under this barrel bridge up here. The impressive thing is that 8 days of power is guaranteed. The movement, the caliber 875, will actually run for almost 10 days. JLC rates it as an 8-day because that's how long it can maintain precise timing and isochronism. That's an interesting feature, and here's a convenient feature. It's only 50 turns from 0 to 8 days of power reserve. Now, why is that special? Consider that it takes 40 turns to top off a Rolex caliber 3135, and for the 5-day, and that's only approximately a 48-hour power reserve. For the 5-day power reserve of the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, you have to wind the crown fully 108 times. This is an 8-day movement that you can top off with 50 turns, and it turns like butter. A tactile pleasure. It feels every inch the high-end piece of watchmaking it is, and it's a real tribute to the manufacturer. Now, the Grande Date is one of the highlights of the watch. You'll notice it's part of the name, so it must be something special, and indeed it is. This is another carryover from that exquisite Septantieme movement. The Grande Date is a unique, patented piece developed by JLC using 2 primary wheels and no program wheel. They had a previous Grande Date design that they actually gave to their sister company, A Longa Unsuna, when that one was founded, and the original JLC Grande Date mechanism actually became, ironically, an icon of revived Saxon watchmaking in the modern era. Just a nice little fun fact. So between the quality of the finish, the Côte de Genève, the heat-blued cobalt screws, the gorgeous anglage, all the countersinks for the jewels and the screws themselves polished, and beautifully grained wheels, this movement is a feast for the eyes, and because it fills the case edge to edge, there's a lot to behold. There's a lot on which to feast. A gorgeous piece of watchmaking in the traditional sense. JLC's really revived the Reverso concept in the modern era. No longer a sports watch with a metal side to resist the blows of polo mallets. It's now a dual-sided platform to showcase complications and watchmaking prowess, either an open case back and complications, or a dial featuring complications on both sides. In this case, JLC serves up all the complexity you could want on the multiply finished Arabic numeraled guilloche front dial, and then on the back they leave the caliber 875 open to appreciate, and this is one to take under the loop. Everything from that immaculate finish to technical curiosities like the Triovis micro regulator are outstanding elements of true manufacturer watchmaking. They're there for you to appreciate. Just like every element of this dial, beautifully rendered with just enough calculated asymmetry, adds an element of art to the engineering. Every side of this watch showcases one element of the manufacture. On the back, it's engineering and finish. On the front, it's art design and complexity. The case itself, all 50 parts of it, yes, 50 parts for the case alone, manufactured entirely by JLC as a true manufacturer. They also make their buckles and they make their cases. This watch is 100% complete with all boxes and papers. This is an outstanding example of the modern Reverso. Again, if you're looking for that iconic JLC, you want to look for a Reverso. And you want to look for a Reverso that speaks to you. If you like art, if you like engineering, if you want a Reverso that wears with modern wrist presence, stance, size, and volume, you have to check out this Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso Grande Date, 46.5 millimeters by 29 millimeters in 18 karat yellow gold. I'm confident it will be the Reverso you want.